It's circling there. We're live. Okay, so I'm going to just say hi in the chat box to whoever's already here waiting. All righty. Kelly, did you see that?
No. Oh, wait, there's a bit of a delay.
There, we're live. Okay, so I'm going to just say hi in the chat mute box that. Whoever's already here waiting.
Yeah, I see it.
And Kelly, are you going to stay on this?
No,
okay, gotcha.
I hid the video. What happened? Why am I still? Oh, no, I'm not there. Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, I'm not on YouTube.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a neat way that it handles that, is it seems to just put whoever's on video are the ones that show up on the screen. So that was just something we figured out by accident.
So can we tell who's on besides us or anything?
I can see in the creator studio,
okay,
who's on. It says concurrent viewers, and I think there's a little bit of a time lapse there. Oh, hi, Ruby. Ruby's on, Liz.
Hey, Ruby, how are you?
Oh,
I can't hear her. That's right.
Yeah. Well, she can hear you though.
Okay. Hi, Ruby.
Yeah, it's been fun that I've been able to talk to Ruby a lot more with her being in Dubai. It's we always were using like WhatsApp or whatever, but now she's able to do some of the Zoom calls.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. She says hi in the chat box. Well, we're going to get started here just in a minute. Oh, she says, hi, Liz. I am great. Haha. Kelly says hi. Okay. Well, we're almost ready to start here, but yeah, we'll just wait until 12 just in case anybody's going to try to log in.
Okay.
Right then. Today, my two kitties, Ash and Max, turned 2.
Oh, happy birthday, kitties.
Yeah, they are pretty rambunctious today. That's a guesstimate because they were foster kitties, but I backed up from that. And either way, I know they're both Tauruses. So
did you foster them? Are you a so-called foster fail?
No, it was a lady, a friend of mine adopted a kitten from this lady, and he called me up. It was like a couple days after my Oliver passed, and he was like, I hope this isn't too soon, but I know somebody who's fostering 5 kittens and needs to find homes. So she was really, really good at what she did with them. I mean, they came so adjusted.
That's nice.
Yeah, I was like, we really need more of you. But she actually used to do it a lot, and she just did this because it was her uncle's situation that she was helping him with. She's like, I'm so busy. It's, she was bottle feeding them all and bathing them and everything. But my cats still go get in the shower because they got so many baths with her. Like, I get out of the shower and they just go sit in the steam. So they just remember that. It's like it's fun for them. Okay, well, hey, Cynthia, I'm glad you could join us. I see you're in the chat box there. And I guess we should just go ahead and get started because we're at 12. All righty. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Devon's Chat. I'm your host, Devon Duerr. I created these chats because I really want there to be a safe, fun environment for people to get to know other healers in the community. There's so many people that are healers out there and so many different methodologies and so much information out there. And when I was doing my own training and my own exploration, I often found that it was tricky to know who to trust, or I would be afraid of reaching out and getting kind of sucked up into the wrong vortex, so to speak, and following the wrong teacher. So I really want this to be a forum for all kinds of people involved in intuitive work or other types of healing. And even if it's not specifically with energy, but just ways that they follow their passion. And so with that being said, if you have any questions as we're going along chatting, please put them in the comment box. We have our lovely moderator, Kelly, here again this week, and she will be relaying the questions to us. So again, I'm Devon Duerr. I'm an intuition coach and teacher. I'm also a trained animal communicator and angel communicator with and a Reiki master. So I've studied different types of energy healing. I'm trained in EFT, emotional freedom technique tapping, and as well as the scalar wave method. Today we have our wonderful, wonderful guest, Liz Murdoch here. Hi, Liz.
Hi, how are you?
I'm so excited to have you here. Liz is an animal communicator as well as the host of the very popular podcast, Talking with the Dogs. So thank you so much for being here.
You are welcome. I'm glad to be here.
So Liz, tell us a little bit about yourself. I want to know, first of all, my first question that I always like to ask is, how did you get into being an animal?
So it just happened. I first understood a dog when I was in kindergarten. A dog came for show and tell, and it had purple nails and a matching purple bow. And I knew that the dog didn't like it. I heard the dog sort of say, it did say, "There's more to me." And I was like, the dog is just standing there, and it was sort of frozen in my mind, and I understood it. Then, but I didn't think anything different. Like, Mom, I could understand a dog, because 5-year-olds sort of just accept the world and things they observe. They don't think anything's different in a lot of ways. So it was, as my life went on, I continued to interact with dogs and animals and love them. Definitely. I won the blue ribbon in dog training with adults when I was 9. So my bond with my dog was very natural. But the first time I ever thought this is something was when I was working in San Antonio. I worked at Warm Springs Rehab Center for many years as doing dog therapy with patients, animal assisted therapy, when we work with a team. And I was looking at my dog one day, and I thought, wow, I know exactly what he's thinking. I know when he has to the bathroom just by the look in his eye. And that I thought was unusual, because I realized, so that was, so from there on, I started cultivating that more. Okay, but it was that awareness.
And you have your master's in education, correct? So
I do.
What did you, how are you using that now? Are you using that now?
I am, actually. So my master's is in international education. And in that program, we had to have an emphasis, and mine was communication. What I wanted to do was create curriculum to teach people whatever topics. I just wanted to educate and teach. I'd been in a car accident with a near-death experience, and my takeaway, one of them, was to live a life doing something that matters. And the trick, of course, is figuring out what that is to me or anybody, and then finding ways. And for me, I loved education and kids and teaching. So I am teaching how to talk to your dog, but I'm also working on some curriculum to go with that. So I'm very excited that that program that I did and all the different things I did in grad school, and then afterwards I developed curriculum for kids for companies like Leapfrog and Time Warner. And now I just never thought I would be focusing it on dog education for families and people who have dogs, but I'm very happy doing that.
So how did you connect the two then? What made you decide, knowing that you knew these things, that it was an intuitive thing? Were you already doing other intuitive work besides teaching and working with kids?
So one of the jobs that I had in a past life, I worked for a nonprofit organization where I would go in and we would teach like bullying, how to deal with bullies and resilience and saying no to bullies. And then it would morph into understanding the difference between like drugs and alcohol. And in that program, a key component was active listening, and active listening to not only others, but to yourself. So when we're teaching kids to say no to we would role play, like how to, if one kid says to the other, let's be mean to that girl, or let's go steal from the store. All of that has to do with listening to yourself. So I've had that, and I taught that, and I did teacher training for that for many years. Learning how to listen to ourselves and say no, or how we deal with bullies, or whether kids don't want to do whatever it is that doesn't feel right, is all the same intuition muscle that I use when I listen to a dog. It started by listening to myself. And then I was like able to combine that with, oh, I can hear dogs. Now I'm going to use it as a everyday thing.
I love that, because one of the things that I'm always talking about is other words that we use, intuitive abilities. And so active listening, that's what that is. That's listening to your inner voice, your higher self. So how fascinating. All along you've been using your intuition, right? And it wasn't used in the, you didn't use the word animal communication when you were communicating with your dog, but that's what you were doing.
Yeah. So, and even now, like animal communication, a lot of people are like, well, what is that? And when I was just recently working in Paris and London, and when I got to London, and we're at the breakfast table at the place we were staying, and people were like, oh, where are you from? What do you do? They had no idea what an animal communicator was. So then we said dog whisperer, because I tend to focus on working with dogs. And they're like, oh, like a horse whisperer. I'm like, well, yeah. So I decided, but I felt funny with the whispering thing. I use that sometimes. But what is me is the active listening, because I've done seminars and talks on so much on that I'm like, that I can explain. And I remember one talk I did with a group of women, and I had turned to someone who next to you, and for 3 minutes I gave them this exercise on active listening with each other, and then we talked about it, and they were sharing things with each other that they'd never shared before. And so that's what I like about in my work, teaching people how to hear their dogs, is let's try it this way. And the odds are you're going to start to hear, because the dogs would rather talk to their person than to me. So I'm happy to teach them. I can't talk to every dog.
But you know what, you do specialize in dogs, but the skills that you use are available to you with all animals, correct?
Yes, I have a lot of horse clients. I've talked to snakes. I've had sessions with turtles and fish. Yes, I went to a marketing class, and they said, the woman was great, Natalie Hill, said it was like, pick a niche. And I was like, pick a niche. Okay. So I picked dogs, and it was the best thing I could have done, because I am happy to talk to other animals, but I live in a dog world. So, and my life looking back is mostly dogs. So.
Yes, that's what I find so funny about it, is when you look back with that hindsight and you see that you were being led to your purpose your entire life, starting from seeing the little dog with the purple nails, but probably even before that is a defining moment for you.
That was the first time I remembered a dog, but I could go back and probably think of other things. You're right. But I have used intuition in my life very strongly for decisions, or that just knowing sense has always been a big part of me. But taking that passion that anyone might have of, I've always just loved stretching. Well, then it makes sense that you want to do yoga. You just don't realize that until you get quiet. It's always clear when we're quiet. And then having the courage to say, okay, well, how weird is this? I went to Columbia University. I got my master's in education. And now I'm shaking hands professionally saying, well, I talk to dogs, and I can tell you, but I'm like, I just trust it's fun. I had enough people who I've helped that, okay, if they think it's weird, it's okay.
Well, and that's the great lead in, because I was going to talk to you a little bit about working with animals, is when, I do intuition training for people and help them develop their abilities, but animals provide almost instant feedback if you're willing to work with them. And even if it's not instant, just having somebody in your home that you can practice with is really, really beneficial to everybody in the home and to the whole household. And so for me, I know growing up, I grew up with horses, dogs, cats, and they were my source to go to hear my inner voice. When I could just be quiet with my animal, I would feel better. And I definitely received guidance from doing that. I mean, and whether I called it talking to my cat when I was 8 or not, looking back, I can remember very defining moments where it was really, really nurturing and healing for me. So animals do so much for us, and I love that is available to us. So I wanted to ask you if you would share a little bit about maybe some of your favorite stories that from working with animals, whether it's dogs or other animals. I'd also like to hear about maybe kids and animals, because kids are so present, they're so open. And I've had a couple of kids I've worked with a little bit on teaching them animal communication, and boy, they pick it up like that. So I'd love for you to share.
So I love working with the kids because they're very open, and they find it easier to talk to their pets often than the adults. It's just like, it's hard to cut our own hair. People say that. So sometimes adults who are learning animal communication find it easier to initially do it with a different dog than the one that they know, because they also have judgments. But kids will pick up on their own animals very quickly. So I've done 2 podcast episodes, Talking with the Dogs podcast, with children. One is Sky, a first grader. And I asked Sky's mom, and she said, well, I don't know if she'll sit that long. She's in first grade. She's little. I go, well, just go as long as we want. I think she'll be great. So we did it. And Sky sat there for about 55 minutes talking and listening, and fully engaged. And she gives a lot of insights about her dog, and she was open to it. And she would tell me things about her dog when it's like acknowledging that what I was saying was accurate. So a first grader can do it. Then I did a 9-year-old, and I would ask her both of them. I can ask them questions. And what's fun is they'll say, well, she does this and we're working on it. And I'll say, well, but your dog says, like with the 9-year-old, the third grader episode, I said to her, you're not consistent when you go on your walks with her. Your dog is telling me that she's having so much fun exploring the world that she gets distracted from going to the bathroom, because the dog's issue was it would come home and go to the bathroom in the house. And I said, you need to help her know that a walk is where she can also go to the bathroom. And the little girl's like, oh, yes, you're right. We need to do that. And I said, well, do you think that because there's a family, you could keep track of when she got like a schedule? She goes, oh, yes. And not only are they willing to take what I say, then they can also understand from what they've seen on a regular basis with the dog, oh, this might help, that they can become involved with the solutions, which is what we really want. Because if we tell anybody your dog is sick, whatever, adults are like, oh, I'm busy, I can't do this. But kids tend to jump up like, oh, we need to do this. We need to get the dog its own bed. We need to do this. And if you can get the kids engaged in animal care when they're younger, you've got lifelong animal care. And so that's another reason why I love working with the kids. But they are also able to pick up things and then put it together. Oh, I think she's thirsty too. She did this. So kids take it much faster. And it's like how they grow their fingernails. They just sprout up. And when you teach them how to listen and tie that in with their observations at home, what the dog's doing, it just is like ding, 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 ding. And then there's another episode I did with a 13-year-old girl who was the same way, that she had aha moments about the fresh water that the dog wanted. And, oh, you're right, it just sits there, their dish is empty. Mom, we need to give the dog water. And then the mother's like, well, why don't you give the dog fresh water? Oh, okay. So
yeah. I love those stories, because it's like now you're helping generations come up with a full understanding of how animals have their own thoughts and feelings and opinions, and the way that they interact with us. And maybe we can really, really change the thought process before somebody just happens to see a sign for free puppies on the side of the road and pick it up. And then 2 weeks later, the dog's in the shelter because they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. By just having that information out there to kids now, when they're still so open and they haven't been told what they can and can't do as far as their intuitive abilities. So I love that.
Yeah, that's why I get so passionate. And that's where my background in education, in curriculum design and designing products for Leapfrog online is all met. And I'm like, oh, wow, I can do this. I already know how to do this. And I've taught in classrooms, I've done teacher trainings. So I'm excited that, as woo-woo as it is to, you talk to dogs, it's like, well, actually, this can, make a difference.
Absolutely.
I've worked for those rescues trying to evaluate which dogs they can take in, and they have to be selective because they want it to be a successful adoption. And not all dogs, there's not even enough space for the fosters right now and all of that. So if I can help a family, especially with kids, learn how to make adjustments because they've understood their dog from a new perspective, then I'm like, seriously, I don't care if people think it's woo-woo. I want to make a difference and help the people who, people spend hours on this whole rescuing dogs and the shelters, that it's like, okay, let me help in a way that I can do. And if I can help them and the families, then okay, I don't care.
Absolutely.
It sounds crazy.
Well, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about, because talking about with kids and their animals and understanding how their animals are feeling, it reminded me of a story that I had with one of our cats. I think I was probably 10, but I remember I just knew he didn't feel well, and I just knew it. And I felt kind of bad looking at him, and like I felt like I was getting sick, but there wasn't really any outward sign that he was. And I bugged my mom that something was off with him until she took him to the vet, and he had an infection. And he got over it, but I mean, if it had been allowed to go on, it could have really caused some organ damage. And so can you talk a little bit about how you communicating with a family about their animal can help them when they do need to take to the vet?
So that's a very timely question, because I just had a client who called me up and her dog was sick, and she just said, something's wrong. We don't know what to do. And she was frustrated because they have other animals. So they've been to vets, and it's been, it can add up, and then it's frustrating. It can be when it's 3 different options of 500, 800 unknown. And so what I was able to do was I tuned in and I said, okay, I'm getting 2 things. I'm getting some pain and I'm getting some systemic digestion. I think the dog has diarrhea. I could describe the color of it. And I was like, you definitely need to go to the vet, because she was like, I don't know what to do. And I said, you have to go to the vet. I can feel the dog is in pain that needs to be treated. And I said, it's like something's coursing through a system. I don't think it's neurological. It looks digestive. And I said, I see it I see it towards the hind leg area. So I said, it's probably affecting the pain that's in the hind leg, but he also might have an issue in the legs that needs to be checked, like phase 2. But the primary concern I'm seeing that your dog is telling me is this systemic, probably digestion, but I can't diagnose. It could be neurological because it's a system that's like activated and causing discomfort, and you need to go to the vet. And I was seeing things. I was feeling this discomfort, and then I had this knowing sense. So I get different things. I know, like I've heard you work where you get taste very often. I don't get a taste sensation in my mouth, but I do get a seeing of images and a feeling in like the system. So she went to the vet, who is a believer that dogs communicate telepathically. And the vet said, thank you for this information. And the dog did her test, the vet did. And then she said, based on everything I'm getting and from your animal communicator, I want to do a test on this digestion. They did a blood work, they did a panel, and it was a digestive issue. And the doctor prescribed the pain and some probiotic stuff. The dog is fine and healing from a leg injury. But the client was so happy because she was able to have a much better relationship with her vet, because she felt she knew what to go in and say. And I was also able to say, make sure you tell your vet this, this, and this, these observations from your home life. So the vet can say, oh, it's been 5 days, or it's been this. So the dog's person feels empowered on how to make choices on how they're spending their money, on the healthcare. The dog's happier and the dog is healthier. So there's a lot of different ways that information can be used to move forward.
Yeah, and that dialogue is there for you. I mean, when I was doing more animal communication, now I'm focused on coaching intuition, but when I was doing it, one of the big things that would come up with people was fear of going to the vet. And it wasn't fear of the vet, it was fear of what's going to happen when they get there. Are they going to have an enormous bill? Tell them worse with the animal than it really is. And I love the fact that you teach people to own animals so that they don't have to call you for every little thing, because if you can tune in with your animal on a regular basis, then you're going to notice when something is off. And it might be time to call Liz and get a session, but then you'll know, is this the time to go into the vet? Or is this something that I'm making into a bigger thing than it really is? And I've had situations where everyone around me was telling me something was wrong with my animal, much worse than, and I was able to say, I just don't believe that. I think this is something totally separate. And I got the animal into the vet and the vet helped me. So being able to have that dialogue with your vet can help them so much, because they're to go through the certain ways of assessing things, and they're going to do the best they can for your animal. But if you have something else to help them, I mean, why not? Right?
Yeah. Information is what they need. And it's just like when you take your baby to the doctor's going to ask, how many times is it eating? How many times you changing the diaper? So it's sort of similar with an animal. They want to know those same things, but we don't pay that much attention to. Many of us are not paying attention to our dogs as well as we should in terms of their health care. And so that when something happens, we can't give the vet the information they need to make a diagnosis much easier and faster. So I'm glad to help people, either by telling them what I get from the animal or teaching them how to be prepared for that vet visit. So it's not like, oh no, I have to go again, because the vets, I mean, they want to help. Who pays all that money and time to go to school to get a degree to be a vet? They're doing it because they want to help the animals, but we have to help them help the animals.
Yes.
But whatever we can do. So
yes, absolutely. So, go ahead. Were you going to say something else?
No, that's
okay. Well, we have a question in the box. Hi, Donna. I'm glad you're able to make it live. She was asking, what is one of your most remarkable experiences talking?
So it was probably a dog that I met. I was sent out, I was working for a rescue, and I was sent out to, it was a house that was 40 minutes away from where I lived, and they wanted me to go that night. They said, this guy is called. He thinks he should be getting rid of his dog. I think the neighbors had also complained and then told him. So can you go? It's really, we're not sure what's going on. So I'm like, well, actually I happen to be down in that area tomorrow. So I went, and it was this beautiful house. And I walked in, and it was immaculate. And he said, I was like, where's the dog? I went in the backyard. The dog's face was blank. I'd never, ever in my life seen anything before then or after then. It was just like looking at a statue. He was just standing there. His skin was, his fur was, I can still see it. It was just gray. And he just stood there and he was getting skinny. He was like a black lab. And I looked around and there was a water dish with no water in it. And the dog just stood. And dogs don't do that with me. They smell me. I have 3 dogs. They usually smell my legs. They want to meet me. This dog was frozen. So I looked at him and I said, okay. And he was like, get me out of here. So the owner was sort of embarrassed, but sort of didn't care. And what am I going to do? So I said to him that the owner's wife had died, and he said it had been her dog, and he had a girlfriend. He was living with a girlfriend now. And he said, you know, we're doing the best we can. And I said, well, you know, I would really like to help your dog. And I said to the man, I think that we have a option. And if you're willing, I said, I could take the dog to the vet for you, or maybe you can drop it off and then we could pick the dog up from the vet. And he said, well, I don't know. I said, okay. I said, I know it's a big decision. And anyway, so I left and I went back in my car and I wrote about this dog and what he had told me, that he wanted out of there, and there'd been not much food, hardly any, and there was no water. And I did ask the man, I said, can you at least give your dog some water? I said, I think he's a little thirsty. So I took the vet. So he took the vet to, he called and said he would drop the dog off at the vet the next morning. So he dropped off the dog at the vet because I said, the dog's going to need a bath. This dog needs to go to the vet before he's filthy. He's just dirty. So then I picked the dog at the vet the next night to take him to a foster because the man was willing to relinquish this dog. So I show up at not knowing what I'm going to expect, and it's pouring down rain. And I walk in and I said, I'm here to get him. And he came out and the dog was like shiny black. He's leaping in the air. Makes me cry again. He comes running to me, nuzzling all up to me. I was like, oh my gosh, let's go. And you would have thought he was my dog. And it was amazing. It was just the biggest turnaround I've ever seen. So I took him to the foster that they had, and I walked the dog all over the house, showing him. I talked to him. I said, this is where you're going to stay. You're okay. And the dog went and plopped down on the bed, flapped his tail, and we were like crying. It was shocking. Yeah. So that was the biggest turnaround. And I wasn't sure if the owner was really going to let us take the dog. But
wow, that's amazing. And did you pick up on grief from that dog at all? You said the owner's wife had passed. Was that a part of what was going on as well, or was it more just the fear?
It was the abandonment of how he was being treated. It was the shock of how he's being treated, and the man had this new girlfriend that didn't care. And the killer is that inside the house was a little girl with a cute little dog on the couch. And so the dog had just been discarded. And he was more upset about that treatment than about the passing, because in the work that I've done, animals are very philosophical about death from my experience. So that people die and it's their time. Some animals do grieve different than this particular dog was grieving. This dog had grief for sure, but the grief was the change in how he was being treated, because the next day he was totally different. He'd had a full check, his coat, he'd been cared for and loved. He felt clearly trusted by me. He had the consistency of me in the house, seeing I was still there, that there are still good people. I took him to a house that was definitely not as fancy as where he'd come from, but it was homey and cozy. And there was a woman there greeting him with the bed. And it was clearly a embrace for that dog. And so I think that's what resilience is, and that dogs have resilience. And he was able to have it so quickly because he got what he needed that he'd missed maybe from his previous dog mom. But the grief and the outrage of how he was currently being treated. And when on the other side of a glass door was a beautiful home with a little girl with a little dog that was getting all the attention. That was a huge outrage is the word that he was experiencing.
That's a beautiful story. I'm so glad you were there for that dog, but you don't need to be there to communicate with the dog though. This situation just happened because you just happened to be over there, but
yes,
most of the time you communicate remotely, correct?
I do, especially now. I have clients now who call me up, and it's funny because I'll get off the phone and sometimes I'll share parts of it with my daughter, and she'll say, well, where do they live? I'm like, I don't know. We weren't talking about where they live. I have no idea. I get a phone number. We check in, but when people have signed up for a chat session with me, they usually want to get to the point. So they're like, oh, I want to talk about my dog. Should I get my dog? And I don't know where they live, but I've had clients from overseas. So I know that because we had to talk about the time difference. But yes, I work over the phone, and I don't need to see the dog. Like a picture's great. In the Zoom calls or FaceTime, the dog will come and sit on the lap, and I'll say, well, often they want to get off and get down. If they don't like what we're talking about, they'll leave the room. If they like what we're talking about, they typically come back. And sure enough, that happens. So it's once I have the connection, it doesn't matter where the dog is or the animal. I just did a cat.
Yeah, I saw that. That was a really neat interview. The other thing I wanted to mention too that I've noticed is that animals sometimes, what you're doing, them a voice. So it's not necessarily that the animal is unhappy, not always. It's just more that there's something that there's like a little miscommunication there, and you're helping them with that. And so do you find that any of and we do have some questions coming in the chat box. We will get to those. So just a reminder to those of you watching, please keep putting those in the box. We will get to all your questions. That do you ever have your clients or the family members being afraid of the animal telling on them?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay. So what happens with those?
So, I mean, sometimes it's amusing. So there was a woman that I was talking about the other day who the dog was bothered by something, and she wasn't sure what it was. And I said, well, it misses being allowed on the bed. It like sometimes you let the dog on the bed, but you don't. And he wants more time on the bed. And she burst out laughing, and her son was on the call. And families like to do these together. It's fun when families do it. So she said she was busted because the family rule is that the dog is not allowed on the bed. But when dad in this particular family goes out of town, she lets the dog on the bed. Well, dad hadn't been traveling, so the dog was not on the bed as much, and the dog was a little miffed. And so the woman she thought it was funny that the dog had told me something like that because it was true. And it's like, how would I know? But her son was on the phone, so he heard the call. So, I don't know, people say like, if like you talk to animals, that if you talk to my dog, he might tell you something than he tells me. I can't control the information I get. It's what the animal feels comfortable sharing at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah. Sometimes people are busted, but most of the time people find it amusing, or they'll start crying because the animal shares something very specific that's heartfelt, that touches them. A lot of the times people start to cry.
I think that's my favorite sessions. Not that people are crying, but when people have an understanding of how much their animal understands what they're going through, whether it's grief or anxiety or stress, that the animals actually know and understand, and they're trying to help them, and that's so helpful. And then to the funny part, as far as, you know, when you have friends and family that know you're an animal communicator, but they don't totally understand how it works, I do find that sometimes they're afraid of what's going to happen when you come over to their house. Like, what are they is the dog going to tell you about the fight I got in with my spouse last night? You know, and just because I do intuitive work, I will sometimes pick up on that from the human, because, you know, they're trying to protect that information. And so it's kind of coming out telepathically. But most of the time I found, especially with dogs, that they're very protective of their family. And they're in any information they have to give, they're either being funny or they're just showing that they love the family, and they're just trying to improve that understanding there. Right.
Definitely. So I had a dog, a woman called me. I think she was, I don't know, she called and I was like, your dog doesn't want to talk about you. I said, you are a very private person. And this was someone I don't know. I just, all I knew was her first name and that someone had referred her. And the dog was very tight-lipped. And I said, you are a very private person, and your dog does not want to tell me very much about what's going on. Because sometimes dogs will describe things. I said, but this, and she agreed. And I was sort of flummoxed because I was like, does she think I just don't get anything? And this is like a cop out, but it wasn't. I said to the dog, what can you tell me that would be helpful to her? I have to word it a certain way to get trust with these animals sometimes. And we got through the session and she got something that I think could be helpful. But that was fascinating. That dog didn't want to say anything, but I did tell her that your dog is willing to talk to you if you want it, and will talk to you directly. And so I think it encouraged her to listen more to her dog and try and build that relationship. So I don't know what happened after, but yes, sometimes they don't want to talk. The other thing is I don't remember. So I will run into people, or sometimes embarrassing, they'll write to me and they'll say such and such. And I'm like, oh wait, I have to look that up. I keep notes and I write down in each session so that I can go to the page and say, oh, because I close it out so that I'm not intruding and going back. And I do it so well now that I forget. That, you know, whatever the cat's name, I'm like, what was your cat's name? Let me look it up. So that's keeps it healthy.
Well, that brings up a good point, because last week my guest that I had on, Tracy Day, she's another energy healer and spiritual teacher. She discussed the cord cutting that she does with her clients. So do you find, is that kind of what you're doing? Like by having the notes and putting away, you're cutting with that connection with the animal so that you're not carrying that animal's energy with you all day?
Yes, because I don't want to worry about the animal at all. I mean, not that a lot of them I worry about, but like that one dog, you know, you wish them well, especially when in rescue. It's like, oh, how does it go? Are they going to do this for the dog? I have to trust that it's going off on its journey, and that's their relationship. And I did my part. So yes, I have to close it out and thank you. And I do open the door to the client and say, if you want to email me with any questions, and most of the time they don't have, it's closed out and they come back for other sessions, certainly. But I make a good point, and I always end my sessions in a certain way. So that I think also helps.
Feels like it's, yes, containing the energy there and not taking it with you all day.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's important in any kind of energy work.
Yes. Okay, great. Well, I want to get to a couple questions in here, but I did want to share that when I was first doing animal communication for others, not just with my own animals, that was a struggle for me to connect with an animal and not really know if the owner was going to be able to proceed with what the animal is asking for. And so that was, and I think that's in any profession you have, right? If you're trying to help somebody and you're giving them information that is helpful to them, it's ultimately on them to go. Now, if you say that the animal really needs walks 3 times a day, not just once before bed, are they going to take action on that? And so I admire what you do and that you're giving them that voice, but then it does, when the session's wrapped up, that's, with that family to take that on. So I have a question here. We were talking earlier, Do you find that owners who pass still check in with their animals who are left behind? And how can you tell if that is happening? Oh, that's a great question.
So I had a session with a family that had a dog, and I really say, don't tell me anything about your dog. And people will want to slip something out. I go, the less you tell me, the more you'll take seriously what I tell you. So tell me later. And so I didn't know about where this dog came from. I know nothing about, just, this is my dog. This is the dog's name. So I said, do you have any questions? And they said, yes. Are there any people that the dog really likes or something? And I'm like, favorite other people besides us. And so I picked up on this older woman. I said, yes, there's an older woman, but your dog doesn't see her as much. Well, that turned out that that was the dog's previous owner, because I described what she looked like. And they said, does your dog miss her? And I was like, not really. I said, your dog knows that this is where he lives now. And we had a conversation, what the dog was telling me. And they asked, does she come and see the dog? And I am not somebody who spent a lot of time in past lives and all of that. So I just am like saying what the dog is telling me and what the woman says when I get things like that. And the woman knows that this is where the dog's family is now. And she's grateful that the dog is here and that their time was done. And it was I feel a relief when I say these things that I get, because I'm sharing what I'm getting from the animal, or I guess the person. I don't really understand it, but I got that information, and the family was able to take that with other things they had gotten and known they said that's exactly what she would say. They knew that she'd been a neighbor, and they said that everything I said sounded like it would be something that she would say. So I don't know if they check in. I think that from my years of working with dogs and getting information, that they are very much in the present, and they're very philosophical for the most part. I mean, there's certainly dogs that have different personalities. I do talk with dogs that have crossed over, not as much as dogs that are here. And I find a big difference between those dogs, that they're very philosophical. They're different. And the dogs that are here are very involved with their current life and their mission and here and now. And
physical. Yeah. Well, that's a really fascinating story. I have another question here from Donna. Hi, Donna. I'm glad you could tune in live today. She's asking if ordinary people can learn to communicate with their pets.
Definitely. Now, one of the things is that there's different ways. Like I said earlier, that I've seen Devon work, and she often will describe a taste sensation. I have never had a taste sensation. So I get pictures, I get hearing, like a dog saying a certain word or telling me something. Pictures, hearing, I see things in the pictures. I get feelings, strong feelings. I get knowing senses, but not everyone. So if Donna is learning or trying to figure out, Donna might be a person that only gets pictures, or she might get just hearing things. Everyone's different in how they receive initially. As they practice it, things start to open up. The other thing is trusting it and what you get. And the more you trust it, like I've learned that if a dog tells me, like with Sky, the first grader, I said, your dog is taking the toys to a certain place. Your dog loves is a puppy, and she goes, no, he just runs around with it. I go, Sky, then at some point he's done running with it. Where does he put it? She's like, well, he just runs and runs and runs and runs. She's a first grader. I go, but Sky, think when he's tired, or the dog is a she, when she's tired, where does she put the toy? Behind the couch. I go, okay. Now, when she takes, the next time she gets the toy, what does she do with it? I'm hoping she's going to say, put it behind the couch, but no, runs and runs and runs and runs. I go, Sky, what does she do with the next toy when she's done with it? Because hearing Rosie say she puts it in a certain place. Oh yeah, she does. She puts it behind the couch. She always puts it behind the couch. So yes, because I've done it so much, I'm comfortable being pushy to get the answer for the person to realize what the dog is saying. And that comes with practice, so that you trust yourself and you feel comfortable saying something that goes against the person. Oh no, she runs and runs and runs. Or I've told people, your dog's favorite toy is this. I said to a woman, it's a yellow duck. It's yellow and it's like a duck, or I described this whole thing, and the woman's like, I don't know. I go, well, now I've learned to say, well, think about it. So she thinks about it, calls me the next day. It's brown because it's dirty. It was yellow when we got it. So trusting, Donna, also.
I love that. And I just want to address one quick part of that question too, Donna. There is no ordinary. I mean, we all have intuitive abilities. I really believe we are all born with intuitive abilities, and some we're maybe more open to, some get shut down through different experiences, but they can be reopened with intention. And so really, I wouldn't describe anybody as ordinary with this. Now, I think some people, again, are just more naturally open. Maybe it's something their purpose. For example, Liz, I mean, you were getting all this information from these dogs because you were being guided in this purpose. And then you were being guided with your other things that you learned that helped you hone it. And we have another question about honing it. So do you want to talk a little bit about, we're getting close to the end of the hour, but we do have a workshop coming up, you and I. So if somebody wants to hone their skills, how would they do it? And you want to share a little bit about that?
Definitely practicing it. And for me, I love writing it down. I have a notebook that I only use for my dog conversations. And I do other animals, but I have a notebook I use, and I put the date and I write down the animal's name. I write down the person's name who's with me. And like Devon, for instance, if I were to talk to her, one of her cats, I would not want to know anything about anyone else who's in the house. If somebody has moved out, if somebody is in the other room, I just want to know about the dog. So I don't ask anything, so I'm not influenced. I think that that's a really good way to just receive information from the animal. So I write it down and I keep writing. And so in some classes I've taught, especially the beginning classes, people will write and then they'll stop. And they're like, that's all I got. I'm like, okay, now I want you to go back and ask the animal, can you tell me more about the carrots? Or can you tell me more what you meet? Can you tell me what you meet? Ask probing questions like you would to a first grader. Tell me about your day. What did you really like? Ask the dog, what did you like? And then write it down. And then if you get the word carrots, then as you're talking, if you get it again, I write it down. I just keep writing down, because what'll happen is I'll tell the person something and they might say, well, I don't really know. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just telling you what I got. And then we'll keep talking and they'll say, well, there was a time my dog got sick when it ate carrots. And I'm like, well, remember, wait a minute. I told you in the beginning about carrots. And they're like, oh, because it doesn't hit sometimes. So having it written down for anyone who's practicing helps you see what you were getting. And then if you keep getting it, because often I'll get variations on the same word, or I'll end up circling it. I'm writing and then I just circle it because it's like coming really strongly, or I underline it and I just let it flow. So practice that too. What you get, asking, like going deeper. And then doing it a lot. You can tell your best friend secret, I'm practicing this. I know it sounds weird if you're uncomfortable. Can I just practice and see what happens? I taught a class here in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, and the woman who owns the place says, I want to book you when you're done. I go, okay, or why don't you just come to the class? So she came to the class. She wasn't even going to come to the class. She came to the class and she figured out the answer to the question that she was going to hire me for, because we got her so relaxed and she followed the steps and she's like, oh my gosh, I got the answer. Because the dogs want to talk to their people.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so yeah. I hope those tips help.
Yeah, that's really helpful. There's another question. Have you ever worked with someone who simply couldn't communicate with their animal?
You cut out, who simply what?
They simply could not communicate.
That I couldn't?
No, they're asking if the person couldn't. Kelly, can you clarify that? If the owner just could not talk to their own animal, is that what you're asking?
Right. Just if somebody really wanted to communicate with their animal, but found that they simply couldn't. In other words, you couldn't teach them.
Yes. No. When I teach, I often have them do a different animal for a very beginner, because it's easier with a different animal when they don't know, because then they're not judged. I was a guest on Patricia Young's The Highly Sensitive Person podcast, and she wanted me to talk to her dog, and she in the beginning said, I'm pretty sure I know what my dog is going to say. I just want to see what Liz says. I'm like, okay. So she was blown away, because it was not what she thought that her dog was going to say. And there were things that surprised her. And she even says that she had a delay sharing the podcast because she had to process what it had said. And in our conversation, I told her things about some adjustments that the dog was requesting. So she implemented those, and then she posted it because she wanted to talk about it. But she was blown away that the dog said things she didn't know. And I think that's because we project. We think we know so well. So that's why it is, even for me, good to have somebody else talk to my dogs to see what I'm missing, because I don't know everything. So for the person who's doubtful of their abilities to get their info from their own dog, practice on a different dog. You can practice on my dog. Email me and you can practice on one of my dogs.
Yes, that's so true. I mean, when I'm in a really time of stress, I go to one of my colleagues that's an animal communicator with my animals, because I want to make sure I'm not projecting. So just like, surgeons don't do surgery on themselves or their family, right? They somebody else. So yeah, it can be very beneficial. And I certainly had that experience where, an animal was being dressed up every day and carried around in a stroller. And that dog was a warrior. That dog did not want to be treated that way. But the owner definitely was not aware of that. But there are dogs that love it, right? And your dogs are like, this is my fun. This is my joy doing this with my owner. So just like humans, we all have our different feelings and emotions about things. And so, yeah, it's definitely very fascinating to see what else we might be missing just from, think about it when you're living with a spouse or your children, like, I like to use the example of when your kids are growing up, you don't always notice their growth spurts the way that maybe the grandparent does.
Right.
You have seen them in a week or two, and then they're like, boy, she shot up 2 inches. Like, oh yeah, you know what? Now that you say that, she did, so
perfect example.
Living in a household like that. So yeah, I think that was most of the questions we had. Oh, hi Jan, I see you're on there too. Thank you so much to everybody that's able to join live. I want to talk a little bit about how you guys can get a hold of Liz. Liz, can you tell us how they can reach you?
So you can email me at hello@Liz Murdoch. It's MURDOCH.com. Email's fine. I'm on Instagram at Talking with the Dogs, Facebook, Talking with the Dogs, and Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. I've just started my own YouTube channel, so I'll be doing more things coming up. And I think that's just plenty of ways to find me. And I have a website. I have a website too. You can book appointments at talkingwiththedogs.com or just learn more about my work.
And then of course, in the details below this video, I will put everything she just said there, so you can go find it later if you, for some reason you missed that. Yeah. And then if you'd like to reach out to me to stay in touch for when we have these chats, you can follow me on Instagram at devon.duerr, and Facebook is at it's Devon Duerr. And then my website, devonduerr.com, under events. I keep up to date there. I'm also trying to do a lot more Facebook Lives to keep you guys posted on stuff we have going on. And if you'd like to join my private group, Coffee with Devon, that's where I interact with a lot of my clients and help you develop your abilities. Don't you have a private Facebook group, Liz?
I do. Talking with the Dogs and Friends.
Talking with the dogs and friends. And so people can connect there and talk about their animals as well.
That's right. And get tips from each other. So, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And just a quick reminder, thank you to all of you who have subscribed to my YouTube channel. Liz has a YouTube channel under Liz Murdoch. If you'll go click the little bell when you subscribe, it'll notify you when we go live. It'll notify you of my next Devon's chat and upcoming stuff, as well as just regular videos, because I offer tools and tips for cultivating your intuition on my channel. And then at the end of June, Liz and I are going to be hosting a workshop. So for those of you who are interested in how to talk to your own animal and develop that relationship a little bit more, we are going to be doing that the last weekend in June. So definitely connect with us on Facebook and YouTube. And we love hearing from you. So if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to us. We love it. We're all here in this together. So wanted to add, Liz, before we wrap up?
No, this is great. Great questions. I hope that people will take it to heart and give it a try with a dog or cat or any animal in their life. The geckos talk to. So I just encourage people to give it a try. And if you have any questions or comments, I hope you'll reach out.
We have one more question. I'm sorry, Jan, I didn't see your question earlier. Jan is asking, do you have a book? And if it's not too late, what is the best way to help your pet crossover, and how do you know when it is time?
Okay, so the book is in development. I actually have a meeting this afternoon at 3 to go over it with an editor. So yes, that's coming. And knowing when it's time is that's really hard. That is a time that it's good to work with me or someone, or even a friend, that you can really share your grief. I just did that. I had a client over here yesterday who had just picked up her cat's ashes, and I had helped walk her through that crossing over. And it is gut-wrenching to know, but that is a good time to talk to your animal. And that's what I coached this client about with her cat, of your cat will let you know, and that it's okay. I was getting that the cat was okay and saying the timing is up to you. Sometimes the animals will cross over on their own before we want them to. And I've had them say, well, it was time to go. I didn't want you to incur more pain to keep me alive. I had to go quickly. And the animal did. Others, this one most recently said, it's up to you when you are ready. You need to be ready. So she worked it out with that cat. It's really hard emotionally sometimes to know, but it really is between you and the animal. And so I will coach people to trust what you think is right for you as well as the animal, because sometimes the animal is looking out for you. But typically we know when it's not overcome with grief, or like, well, I've got to do this and this. When we put it aside and are with the animal, that courage comes up because we're doing it out of compassion for the animal. And we know, and when we have a vet, finding the right vet, whether you want them at the house or you want to go there, it's a bigger topic. We can talk another time just on this, but knowing it's often in there somewhere within ourselves with the animal that we know. It's trusting and having the courage to do it in that timing, even when we don't want to.
Absolutely. And I'd like to follow up too with, as far as, and it is a whole nother topic, the helping them cross over, and we're out of time today, but that every animal is different. That. So that's not, there's a lot of ways to help an animal cross over.
Yes.
And usually the animal will tell you, I mean, whether they want help or not, or whether they want a certain type of help. I've found that, the animals that, there are animals that want to go on their own. They don't want to put the owner through the grief, the extra grief and extra expense, or they just want that private moment to themselves. That's why another great reason to connect with an animal communicator. If you're starting to wonder, I don't know if this is me or if this is the animal, then you get that other
right
to connect.
Yeah. And accepting if they pass, in a way that we didn't control, that we can trust that that's between the animal and the animal's journey. And we don't have to have an extra burden of grief or guilt because it happened that way and not the way I wanted it. So,
right.
So Risha, clearly we have another topic here.
Yes,
I hate
well, and Liz, I'd love to have you on again. This is so fun. And will be doing more of these. Next week's chat is the next couple of guests I have on, because of their work schedule, we may be changing. I know I've been doing this Thursdays at noon, but I may be doing some or a different day of the week to be able to connect with them. But I do want to follow up with the people that I'm having on as guests. And so those of you who weren't able to ask live today, please stay in touch with Liz and myself, and we'll make sure that we can all connect, because this is a great time for that, right?
Yes, definitely. And our animals, especially.
Yes. And thank you so much, Liz.
You're welcome.
Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. And thank you to the audience. Thank you to Kelly, our lovely moderator. Thank you for monitoring the chat box for us. So yeah, I guess that's we're going to wrap up for today. So stay tuned for next week's Devon's chat. And thank you all again. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.